Welcome back to the Black Ledger. Tonight we are not auditing gold. We are auditing its price. Leave the vault door open. Let the light from those physical bars spill out behind you. But do not look back. Tonight, the weight we felt in the last entry, it doesn't exist here. We are moving from the world of atoms to the world of ghosts. In our last entry, you held it. You felt the weight of something real, cold, dense, final. Gold did not need belief. It only needed to be weighed. It was the final settlement of human effort. But tonight, I want you to look somewhere else. Turn away from the vault. Look at the screen on my desk. Look at that moving line. Green, red, flickering. A jagged pulse cutting through the darkness of the room. The world calls this the price of gold. Watch it for a moment. Up 3 cents, down 2. It looks so frantic. Like a trapped animal trying to find a way out of the glass. But notice the silence in the vault behind you. Nothing there moved. Not a single atom shifted. So, what exactly is that line measuring? I'm here to tell you. That line is not discovery. It is construction. Economists love the term price discovery. They want you to believe the market is a grand, democratic conversation where supply and demand meet in the light of day. They want you to think that screen is a mirror, faithfully reflecting the soul of the metal. But mirrors can be tilted. Glass can be smoked. What if the reflection you're seeing was painted on the glass before you even walked into the room? What if the price isn't following the gold, but the gold is being dragged by the price? What you are seeing on that flickering monitor is not the value of gold. It is the management of perception. It is a carefully calibrated signal sent to your brain to tell you what to believe about reality. Behind that line, there is something you cannot see. Not a bar, not a vault, but a system. Take a breath. The air in here feels thinner when you look at the screen, doesn't it? That's because there's no oxygen in a digital promise. It's clean. It's sterile. It's infinite. And that is its greatest weapon. It is a system designed to answer one single, desperate question. How do you control the price of something you cannot print? If you cannot manifest the metal out of thin air, you must manifest the idea of the metal. You must create a shadow so large, so heavy, and so convincing that the world forgets to ask if there is a body casting it. The rain is steady now. It's washing the dust off the windows, but it can't clear the screen. We are going to go inside that line. We are going to find the point where the metal ends and the lie begins. Welcome to the era of shadow bars. In the sessions to come, we will dismantle the machinery of this alchemy. We will audit the contracts that have no collateral, the promises that have no vaults, and the ledger entries that act as anchors for a world drowning in debt. Stay with me. Don't look for the light. The audit of the false signal starts now. Let's unseal a file that the history books prefer to keep dusty, hidden beneath layers of academic jargon. We're going back to 1961. The post-war euphoria was fading. The cracks in the Bretton Woods system were no longer just whispers. They were screams. The US dollar, the self-proclaimed king, was in trouble. It was anchored to gold at $35 an ounce. But America had printed too many promises and held too little reality. In late 1961, 8 men, representing the most powerful central banks on Earth, leaned over a mahogany table. They signed a pact of intervention. This was the birth of the London Gold Pool. Imagine the room. The air is thick with the smell of expensive tobacco and old vellum. Not a single camera was allowed inside. These men weren't elected, but they were deciding the fate of your labor. They weren't looking at charts. They were looking at each other, calculating how much of their nation's soul they could afford to sacrifice to keep a lie alive. In that silence, they didn't just manage a market. They built a cage for it. It was a hidden fortification. The US and its allies committed their citizens' wealth to a shared reserve. Why? Because the dollar's survival depended on it. They were there to hunt gold down whenever it dared to rise against the paper king. You've probably seen it before. A small movement. A few dollars up. But in 1961, that small movement was a declaration of war. It meant the world was starting to trust the metal more than the men. So they sat in the shadows and they waited. They were the first architects of the artificial ceiling. The weight was real back then, but the intent was already a shadow. Why was that $35 ceiling so critical? Because if gold rose, the illusion of the dollar would shatter. It would be a public admission that the paper in your pocket was losing its soul. So the pool became the invisible hand's iron glove. Every time gold dared to breathe, the pool acted with surgical coldness. They developed a tactic called the coordinated hammer. The moment the price hit $35.2, the trigger point, the order was given: execute. Take a breath. Feel the stillness. No new mines had collapsed. No ships had sunk. The world didn't suddenly have more gold. And yet, the price was forced down by a ghost hand. It's the sound of a heavy door slamming shut every time the truth tries to speak. That alone should feel like a cold shiver down your spine. They didn't sell gold because they had too much. They sold to crush the spirit of the market. Imagine the scene at the Bank of England's gold room. Frantic cables from New York. Coordinated waves of intervention. They would flood the scale with physical bars until the buyers were exhausted. They were drowning demand in a sea of metal, hoping the world would stop looking at the reality beneath the paper. They didn't need the world to be convinced. They just needed it to be tired. If you make it hard enough to buy the truth, most people will settle for the convenient lie. Markets don't run on facts. They run on participation. As long as you keep playing their game, the cage stays locked. But reality is a patient hunter. France, under Charles de Gaulle, was the first to sense the rot. De Gaulle viewed gold as the only true sovereign of nations. He understood something we've forgotten. You cannot negotiate with reality forever. In 1965, he declared war on paper. France began converting its dollar holdings into gold, month after month. They sent naval ships to New York to collect their physical bars, hauling the weight back to the vaults of Paris. Imagine those ships. They weren't carrying promises or diplomatic cables. They were carrying the sheer physical weight of sovereign independence. Can you hear the heavy chains of the cranes? The dull thud of the bars hitting the deck? While the rest of the world was collecting receipts, France was collecting the only thing that doesn't require a signature to be valuable. They were holding the weight while the empire held the air. When France quietly withdrew from the pool in 1967, the invisible hand lost its fingers. The other members watched their own vaults bleed to save an American promise they no longer believed in. The hunters had become the hunted. Even in the grandest halls, the floor starts to creak before it fails. The men in that mahogany room, they must have felt the cold draft. You can only push against the truth for so long before it pushes back. And eventually, the weight becomes too much for the paper to carry. Something always gives. March 1968. The final month. The London market was seeing chaos never witnessed in peacetime. Ordinary citizens were lining up with paper, demanding the truth. Between March 8th and March 14th, the pool dumped nearly 1,000 tons of gold, vanished in a single week. The US Air Force was reportedly flying gold bars from Fort Knox directly to London in real time. The vaults were being emptied. But the shadow was no longer enough to cover the sun. There's a specific kind of silence that happens right before a crash. It's not peace. It's hesitation. A man stands at the counter. He doesn't want to hear about stability or agreements. He says 3 words that break the entire illusion. Show me the bar. And in that moment, the empire realized. They had run out of metal to throw at the question. On March 15th, the Queen of England declared an emergency bank holiday. The London market was closed by force. The pool had collapsed under the sheer weight of reality. When it reopened, the world had changed. It was the first official admission that the dollar was no longer what it claimed to be. The London gold pool died in 1968. But the architects learned a lesson. They realized that using physical bars was too expensive. It was too visible. When you run out of gold, the world sees the end of your power. They needed a version of gold that didn't require a vault. They needed a gold that could be printed as easily as the dollar itself. They needed the shadow bar. The rain outside my window hasn't stopped. It's the same rain that fell on London in 1968. The room is the same. The ledger is the same. But the weapon has changed. They stopped fighting the truth with metal. They started fighting it with concepts. They moved the battlefield into a place you can't touch. "1968 wasn't the end of manipulation. It was the day the game moved from the streets into the invisible architecture of the paper markets. They moved from physical suppression to conceptual alchemy. The era of paper gold was born as a survival strategy for a system that had run out of real gold but refused to give up real power. Take one more breath. The shadow didn't disappear. It just became the floor you walk on. Let that settle. Because the audit of how they built that floor has only just begun. (1968). The London gold pool didn't just break. It shattered under the sheer, unmanageable weight of reality. The architects learned a humiliating lesson that year. You cannot suppress the price of truth if truth is your only weapon. Every 400-ounce bar they threw into the market to keep the price at $35 was a piece of their foundation they could never get back. Reality was too heavy, too scarce, too visible. Just stay with that for a second. Imagine the void left in the vault every time a bar was sold. A physical hole in the world's reserve that could not be filled with ink. They realized that in a war of attrition, atoms are their enemies. If you use the real thing to fight the market, eventually you have nothing left. That realization was the exact moment the metal died in their minds. They evolved. They realized they didn't need to move the metal if they could move the perception of it. They shifted the battlefield from physical vaults into the abstract, invisible architecture of digital ledgers. Think about the unallocated account. When you buy gold today, the marketing tells you that you are an owner. But look at the fine print. You don't own a serial numbered bar. You are merely an unsecured creditor. You own a digital entry, a promise. It's easier this way, isn't it? No armored trucks. No heavy lifting. No dusty vaults. Just a clean, blinking cursor on a bank's server. It feels modern. It feels efficient. But have you noticed? A promise has no mass. You can stack 1,000,000 promises in a single room and never feel the floor creak. And that is exactly the point. This is the birthplace of the shadow bar. Because the gold is unallocated, the bank functions on fractional reserve alchemy. They sell the same ounce to 100 different people. Most people never ask for delivery. Why would they? The number on the screen says you're wealthy. As long as you're content with the reflection, they don't need to show you the mirror. They've created a world where the idea of gold can be traded, while the fact of gold stays locked away, or simply doesn't exist. If everyone stays inside the dream, the dream becomes the reality. To control a global price, they needed a pressure valve, the COMEX. In the world of derivatives, you aren't trading gold. You're trading contracts, promises of a future that never arrives. This is the synthetic supply. When the price begins to rise, the architects summon the shadow. They dump thousands of sell contracts in seconds. More gold than is mined in a year, appearing on a screen from nowhere. Watch the chart in your mind. A sudden, vertical drop. That's not the sound of metal hitting the floor. That's the rhythmic scratching of ghost pens rewriting the law of gravity. They aren't mining the earth. They're mining the ledger. They drown the price in a flood of digital ink until the real buyers are forced to retreat. It's the ultimate financial diversion. These shadow bars act as a sponge, absorbing the demand and diverting it away from the physical vault into a digital reservoir. Turning a scarce, rebellious asset into an infinite, manageable distraction. Take a breath. The screen is still flickering. You're still here, in the quiet of this office. But look at the world differently now. How much of what you call wealth is actually heavy? And how much of it is just a shadow cast by a flickering light? Let it settle. The audit of the mechanism continues. Look at the world around you today. This architecture of shadows is no longer a secret experiment. It is the global standard. And its most potent weapon isn't a complex algorithm. It's convenience. The system is designed to keep you light. They tell you that owning physical gold is clunky, dangerous, and inefficient. They offer you apps that track the price but never touch the metal. They invite you to participate in the exposure of wealth without the burden of possession. It's so easy to click a button, isn't it? To see your balance update in milliseconds. They've turned the most rebellious asset in history into a video game. If it's fast, if it's clean, if it fits in your pocket, you stop asking questions. They gave you the speed, so you wouldn't notice you lost the substance. Every digital asset you hold is just another layer of insulation. These layers are there to protect the system from your demand. By keeping you in the paper layers, they ensure your capital never reaches the physical market. You are holding the map. But they are holding the land. Imagine a wall made of millions of pages of fine print. You're on one side, watching a digital projection of a sunset, and you're content. Because as long as the projection is bright enough, you don't care that the sun itself has been moved to a private vault. That is how separation begins. But as an auditor, I have one cardinal rule. Ignore the marketing and watch the flows. While the banking system sells you on a cashless future, the central banks are in a fever dream of accumulation. They don't announce it in the press releases. There's no buy button on their website. But in the dead of night, the cargo planes are heavy. The balance sheets are being reweighted with atoms, not bits. They are telling you to run toward the future. while they are quietly retreating into the safety of the past. From east to west, the institutions that manage the paper world are hauling physical bars back into the darkness. They aren't buying paper claims. They are buying the heavy. They move thousands of tons across oceans, bypassing the paper markets entirely. They understand that in the final audit, a contract can be nullified. But a gold bar is a final, immovable fact. We are witnessing the great divergence. The gap between the flickering ghost on your monitor and the actual cost of a bar in your hand is no longer a crack. It's a canyon. It's a quiet difference, almost invisible. On one side, screens, balances, interfaces, light as air. On the other, metal, cold, silent, immovable. One is a system of belief. The other is a system of truth. And the distance between them is the measure of the coming storm. When you look at the price today, you aren't looking at the value of gold. You are looking at the cost of the lie. The masters of the system are moving behind the walls of the vault, preparing for the moment the paper cathedral finally collapses. They are selling you the future while they hoard the past. The rain hasn't stopped. The room is the same. But you can feel the floor now, can't you? You can feel the difference between what is promised and what is present. Only the way you see it is starting to shift. The audit of the shadows is almost complete. The system appears stable. It looks like a fortress of glass and light, reflecting a world that believes in its own permanence. But as your auditor, I must show you the single fragile condition upon which this entire architecture rests. It only works if no one asks for the bar. Stay with that silence. The entire global financial order is a gentleman's agreement. It's a collective promise to keep the eyes closed. As long as you are content with the digit, the system is infinite. But the moment you crave the atom, the infinite becomes a cage. Because the structure is built on a fundamental imbalance. Many claims, few assets. 100 owners for a single ounce, all holding the same paper, all believing they are the only one. And when enough participants move from paper to physical, the system cannot adjust. A 100-to-1 ratio has no room for a mistake. It's a mountain of debt resting on a needle's point. You cannot calibrate a collapse. You cannot negotiate with a vault that is empty. When the first domino falls, it won't be a conversation. It will be a snap. It can only reveal itself. This is the moment the architects have spent 60 years avoiding. The moment of delivery. The moment of verification. The moment someone, a nation, an institution, or perhaps just a person who has seen through the veil, stands at the counter and says, "Show me the bar." Imagine the man behind the counter. He has the spreadsheets. He has the screens. He has the signatures. But he doesn't have the weight. And in that silence, between the request and the reality, the shadow bar simply evaporates. Because shadows have no weight. The audit is complete. For the past hour, you have seen the system, not as it appears in the headlines, not as it is taught in the universities, but as it functions in the dark. Gold remains the same. Heavy, silent, final. It sits in the earth and in the secret vaults of the bold, waiting for the paper world to finish its frantic dance. The room is dark now. The monitor is off. The flickering lines are gone. The only thing that remains is what you brought in with you. Your labor, your time, and the question of what you've traded them for. But the price. The price is something else. A signal. A construction. A managed illusion designed to keep you from reaching for the exit. Take one more breath. When you look at the price of gold tomorrow, are you looking at the metal? Or are you looking at the ghost of a bar that was sold 100 times before it reached your screen? Stay grounded. In a world of vanishing promises, remember this. Only what can be held can be proven. The audit is paused. The truth is inevitable. Hold the heavy. Good night.